everybody. This is the brief Delphi Council debriefing. I am the only one here today. A couple of things happened. If you're watching this, you will see Mars, my cat, being a pain because anytime I talk, he jumps in my lap. I usually put him in the other room for these. So sorry about that. But let's get into the Delphi Council brief debriefing. So Jay was unable to make it, and I myself am very busy this week with family matters. Those of you who don't know, my father suffered a stroke a few years ago, as well as having cancer, and this week he's been very bad. So I in poor condition, and I am taking some time to help him and my mom. So this is going to be a short one. If you don't want to listen to this one or watch this one, I completely understand. But I wanted to show how a game master and player can work to change something that is already available and manipulate it or reskin it in a way that both the player might really like if they have an idea that doesn't quite fit but it's almost there, how the player and game master can work together, or if a game master wants to put in something new, how they can do it. So I'm going to use this path of unification as a base. The path of unification has a prereq of at least 2 adds in kinesis and 1 add in unarmed combat, and the list is the discipline psychic, and you need to have that as well. So there's basically 3 prereqs. So in this hypothetical situation, let's say a player likes the idea of this, but instead of using kinesis and unarmed combat, they were thinking more of something like using precog and a melee weapon, say a katana. So they're like, hey, Game Master, I have this concept. The path of unification is something that looks really nice, but I really don't like kinesis and unarmed combat with it. I would like something with, say, the precog and unarmed combat as being those things. So player and the game master get together and they kind of look at this as a basis. The first thing is you can check to see which things you can just transfer over with no or minimal alterations needed, and then you can swap out things as you progress. So for the first part of the path, it has a painful touch, which is after dealing damage with an unarmed combat, spend 1 shock to inflict 1 shock on all targets who took damage. So in this one, if you did an unarmed attack and you hit 5 people, then you could spend a shock to damage to 5 people. Then you spend 1 shock and they all take an additional shock. So you're distributing 5 shock amongst your 5 targets. So this sounds like something that it could easily transfer over. You just make it so that instead of it being an unarmed attack, you use melee weapons in its place. So the painful touch for, say, a path of precog melee, whatever you decide to call it, you just call it painful touch, or you can maybe have it be painful strike, and then have it that after they've done a melee weapons attack, they spend 1 shock to inflict 1 shock on all targets. So that one's pretty easy, pretty covered. On 2, there's an avoid and deflect, which when attacked before the roll is made, a hero may spend 1 shock to gain a bonus equal to half kinesis, rounded down to his unarmed defense for that attack. So this is another one that could be easily reflavored and have it that instead of being half your kinesis, it's half of your precog adds are rounded down to your melee defense for that attack. So you just change those 2 that were originally in the path of unification and just change the words, and it's the same thing. And then for number 3, which is biokinesis, where you would gain 2 kinesis psionic powers, you just have it as, say, precognition, gain 2 precognition powers. Again, easy. Iron Fist is a gain of telekinetic strike power. That's a specific thing for telekinesis for free. If you already have it, you can spend 2 shock to gain a +4 bonus to the kinesis test to manifest it. For in this one, I'd probably call it something different, and we're talking instead of a telekinetic power, which is mind kinetic energy striking, and have it turn into a precog power. So you might, instead of telekinetic strike, you use awareness. So then you just have it, call it, you can again name it differently if you want to call it special sight, and the psi gains the awareness power for free. And if you already know the power, you may spend 2 shock to gain a +4 bonus to the precognition test to manifest it. So very similar. You're just replacing the telekinetic strike power, which is specific, with another specific power, the awareness power from the core book. Iron Skin, when taking damage from an attack, spend 2 shock to gain a +4 armor bonus against that attack. That one I could see as just being the exact same. If you're going to take some damage, don't have armor, or your armor isn't +4 and you could use it, instead of it being your skin going iron, maybe you're pairing with your blade, but it's jarring. You're trying to do it kind of after you've been hit, so it's going to hurt you a little to shock, but then it gives you a +4, mitigate the damage more. So on that one is how I would change that. With Wire Fu, this is another one that you would gain a specific power with Kinesis, updraft power for free. If you already have it, you can spend 1 shock to manifest the power at a standard success level without making a test, which I think is a cool way to do things. Is a, hey, you can spend a shock, you manifest it, you don't have to roll, you won't critically miss, but you're not going to gain a good or outstanding success. So it balances in that way. But again, updraft is kinetic. What would we use for the precog? So on that one, I would name it, let's say, Restorative Spirit, and say that you gain the Restore Spirit power for free. If you already have it, you can spend a shock, again, to make it a standard success without making a test. So as you see, it's just manipulating the kinesis and the unarmed and switching them over to precog and melee. On 7, the non-lethal strike. When inflicting damage with an unarmed attack, you can inflict wounds, or rather than inflict wounds, you can spend a shock to inflict 3 shock per wound on targets. This would be a way to knock out people, and sometimes those 3 can. So 9 would take out a lot of minions, or lower shock capacity threats. So you just have it something. I know the dazing is a little different, but on this you could use it with a normal katana. Instead of saying unarmed combat attack, you say a melee weapon attack. Um, so this is something that, again, I would just change unarmed combat to melee combat, and with the dazing that converts the first wound, and this would allow you to convert all wounds for 1 shock. So each wound that you did would convert over, and that's another non-lethal way. And then for the 8th, the unification, it allows you to ignore 2 points of multi-action penalties when the action involves kinesis and unarmed combat. If the hero hits with an unarmed attack and succeeds at manifesting a psionic power, you can spend 2 shock to increase the damage of the unarmed attack +4, or apply the damage to 1 target twice. So on this one, the 1 target twice, you apply the same damage. So what I would do is pretty much the same thing. I might call it something rather than unification, because we're not doing unification. call it whatever you decide to call the path as the capstone power. And again, you just have the hero ignores 2 points of multi-action penalties when the action involves precognisis or precognition and melee combat. If you hit with the melee attack and succeed at manifesting a psionic power, you may spend 2 shot to increase the damage of your melee attack by +4, or apply that same damage that you did to one target twice. Because normally, if you hit somebody with a sword and hit somebody with a sword, you're the same person doing those 2 hits. The FAQ and the Cassandra files kind of change that and don't allow it, but the base rule is you take the highest damage because of the way the logarithmic scale and Torg works. You wouldn't do that damage twice. You would just do the greater of the 2 damage. This would actually allow that to happen twice. And then if you are using the Cassandra file rules or possibly the Torg 1.5 rules, when you can only do 1 damaging physical attack on somebody, this would allow you to do 2 of them. So either way, it can be a boon. And again, I would just do it a different way and have it be melee weapons instead of unarmed combat. So very short. That's why I called it a brief Delphi Council debriefing, but an example that game masters, you and players can have to take something that is already in the game and change it around a little bit to fit a concept that somebody might have that this doesn't quite fit. Yes, it's completely great to do this. You don't necessarily always have to stick with these are the paths, and until Ulysses Spila and the Torg team come up with a new path, there are no more paths at all in Pan Pacifica. Allow your players to change things. One of my players in my classic Torg game played one of the ninjas. I can't remember if it was a corporate ninja or if it was the other ninja. There were 2 that started with a C, but he got a whole path down. He got another path down, and then he started making his own path with me as a game master, and we kind of worked back and forth and how that would advance. So that's something that I think transfers over to Torg Eternity great. If you have a good game master, or you're a good game master, if you have a good player that's not going to abuse it, make sure that there's some back and forth on it. You can change it up a little, and without having the kinesis, you have the precog, so you're not getting some of those more powerful damaging or combat ready things, but you are getting melee weapons, which tend to, not always, you can min-max to have unarmed combat be much higher than a guy with melee weapons, but in general, melee weapons usually do a little more damage, so you kind of balance it out a little bit there, removing the kinesis, adding precog, switching out unarmed combat with your melee weapons. So it was just an example that I wanted to put out there. If you wish to use that, you can listen to this and write it down and use it in your personal game as you will. It'd be great to see something like that being used, as well as allowing you, the game masters, to make the Cosm your own, which is something that we say at the end of every one of these episodes, is we hope you Cosm verse, because that's it. Every game master, every table can have their own rules, and it's canon within the Torg Eternity and the Torg overall lore. So having said that, we'll get back next time, hopefully with the normal Delphi Council debriefing with myself, Jay, and Mark, and go over some new aspect of Torg Eternity that we haven't talked about in the past. Hopefully this means that we weren't completely absent, and therefore people are questioning if we're continuing. Yes, we want to continue, but there might be some of these filler episodes when life gets a little more difficult for us creators. So having said that, I want to thank you again for listening and or watching. Email us, and we'll get the emails next time if we have any, for the You can do that at torgdcd@gmail.com. And until next time, I, Lehman Crafton, line developer of Torg Eternity, really hope that you have fun in your own